$25,000 says the old man doesn't ring a single one.
$25,000 says the old man doesn't ring a single one. The kid said it loud enough for the whole firing line to hear, and a few people laughed because that was the easy thing to do at 10 in the morning, with the sun already baking the gravel and a row of $6,000 rifles waiting their turn. The old man didn't laugh. He didn't even turn his head. He stood at the edge of the bay in a faded barn coat the colour of the weak coffee, his hands folded in front of him the way men of a certain age fold their hands at a graveside, and he looked down the range to where 3 steel plates sat shimmering at 400 yards. He studied them the way a carpenter studies a door that won't close right. If you have ever been written off by people who never once bothered to learn your name, type steady in the comments. Because you're going to understand this man long before the people standing next to him did. His name was Earl Mercer. He was 78 years old, and he had driven 2 hours that morning in a pickup older than most of the shooters on the line, not to compete, but to watch his great-nephew shoot in the junior division, and to buy a tin of cleaning patches he could have ordered cheaper online. He had not planned to say a word to anyone. Men like Earl rarely do. He had spent a lifetime learning that the quietest man in the room is usually the one who has seen the most, and seen things he would not wish on the loud ones. The event was a regional shooting expo, the kind that fills a county fairground with vendor tents and the smell of kettle corn and gun oil. And its main attraction that year was a challenge a sporting goods sponsor had cooked up to draw a crowd. The rules were printed on a banner over the firing line. 3 steel plates 10 inches across set at 400 yards, 60 seconds on the clock, 1 shot per plate, and the catch, the thing that had everyone talking, iron sights only, no scopes, no magnification, no rangefinders, no ballistic apps, no electronic anything, just a rifle, the naked eye, and whatever a man carried inside him. Clear all 3 inside the minute and you walked away with $25,000 in your pocket. By the time Earl arrived, 31 competitors had tried, and 31 competitors had failed. These were not amateurs. They were the men who lived for this, who showed up with rifles that cost more than Earl's truck, found custom actions bedded into carbon stocks, triggers tuned to ounces, barrels spun by gunsmiths with year-long waiting lists. But every one of those rifles had been built to wear glass, and every one of those men had been built around it too. Strip away the magnified optic and the digital readout, ask them to hold a front sight post steady on a plate the size of a dinner plate 4 football fields away, and the wheels came off. They yanked triggers. They rushed the clock. One man cleared 2, and then put his last rounds into the dirt as the buzzer howled, and he walked off the line with his jaw working like he wanted to bite something. The pattern repeated all morning. Good shooters, expensive rifles, and a problem none of their money could solve. The loud kid was named Tyler. He was maybe 26, built like he spent his evenings in a gym, with a rifle slung across his chest that probably had $8,000 in it, and a manner that said he had never once doubted he deserved every bit of it. He had cleared 2 plates himself and missed the 3rd by inches, and missing had put a burr under his saddle that he was working off the only way men like that know how, which is by finding someone smaller to stand on. He had spotted Earl by the rope line, the old barn coat, the slow, careful way he moved, and he had decided the old man was a safe place to put his frustration. "Hey, Pop," Tyler called, grinning at his buddies. "You want to give it a go? 25 grand, easy money." A couple of the younger shooters chuckled. "Tell you what, I'll bet you 25,000 of my own money you can't ring even 1, right here. Right now." It was meant as a joke, the way cruelty often dresses itself up as a joke. Earl knew the difference. He had been the joke before, in airports, and at gun counters, and at the VA. An old man in faded clothes whom younger men addressed slowly and loudly, as though age were the same thing as simplicity. He didn't take the bait the way Tyler wanted. He just looked at the kid for a long moment, and then he looked back down the range at the 3 plates, and something in the line of his shoulders changed, settled, the way a level finds true. "Don't have a rifle with me," Earl said. His voice was quiet and even. "And I don't bet money on what a man can do with a rifle. Never could see the sense in it." He paused. "But I'll shoot your plates." The line officer running the challenge was a soft-spoken man named Hollis, the kind of range professional who had seen 10,000 shooters and could read a man's hands faster than his mouth. He had been watching Earl since he walked up, Something about the way the old man stood, the way his eyes tracked the wind flags down the range without his head moving, had told Hollis a story the barncoat was trying to hide. When Earl said he had no rifle, Hollis didn't hesitate. He reached into the rack behind the bench and lifted out his own, a Springfield M1A, the civilian twin of the M14, fitted with national match sights, a hooded front post and a rear aperture you could click for elevation and windage. He set it on the bench like he was handing over something that mattered. "This one's mine," Hollis said. "She shoots straight. Zero's true at 400. He held the old man's eyes. "Take whatever time you need." Earl's hand closed around the wrist of that stock, and anyone watching closely would have seen something move across his face, something old and private, gone almost before it arrived. Because he knew this rifle. Not this exact one, but its bones, its weight, the cold, familiar geometry of that aperture sight. The last time his hands had held a rifle like this one, the year was 1968, and he was 20 years old, and he was lying in the green wet heat of the Mekong Delta with the 9th Infantry Division, where the army had stood up a school to teach young men with steady hands how to make a single shot count when the whole world was trying to kill them. Earl Mercer had been one of the best they ever turned out, but nobody on that firing line knew it yet. If you believe the things a man learns in the worst moments of his life never really leave his hands, type honor in the comments. He didn't rush. That was the first thing the crowd noticed, and the thing none of them understood. He took the rifle to the bench, and he didn't even chamber around at first. He set the heel of his palm into the stock, found his position, shifted his boots in the gravel by inches until his whole body pointed naturally at the center plate, without a single muscle straining to hold it there. Natural point of aim, the school had called it. You don't muscle a rifle onto target. You build a position that already wants to be there, and then you simply stop interfering with it. He reached up and clicked the rear aperture, counting the elevation under his breath the way you'd count rosary beads. Dialing in the dropper .308 round takes across 400 yards of summer air. He licked a thumb and read the flags. He had ranged the plates with his eye the moment he walked up, the way a man reads the depth of a river he has crossed 100 times. Somebody started the clock. Earl's first shot didn't sound rushed. It sounded inevitable. The rifle settled. The front post hung in that aperture like a planet holding its orbit, and between one heartbeat and the next, the round was gone and the first plate rang. A clean, flat, beautiful clang that carried back up the range and shut every laughing mouth on the line. He didn't celebrate. He cycled to the second plate with the unhurried economy of a man who's done a thing 10,000 times, found his natural point of aim again, breathed, broke the shot. Clang. The crowd had gone dead silent now, the kind of silence that has weight to it. Earl shifted to the third plate. He paused there a half-second longer, and the people watching held their breath, certain the old man's luck would finally run out the way everyone's had all morning. It wasn't luck. Clang. Hollis looked at the timer in his hand, and his thumb came off the button, and he just stared at it. 42 seconds. 3 plates, 3 shots, 3 hits, at 400 yards, on iron sights, by a man who would not see 79, with 18 seconds still sitting on a clock that had beaten 31 younger men. He had not hurried a single shot. He'd had time he never used. Tyler wasn't grinning anymore. What happened next is the part nobody who was there has ever forgotten. A man had been standing near the back of the crowd the whole time, big and square-shouldered in his 60s, wearing a polo with a Veterans Organization logo on the chest, the expo's guest of honor, a retired command sergeant major named Leon Pruitt. 30 years in the army, the kind of man whose handshake other soldiers talk about for the rest of their lives. He had been watching Earl shoot with an expression that kept tightening, like a man hearing a song he hasn't heard since he was young. When that third plate rang, Pruitt pushed through the crowd, and he was not walking like a guest of honor anymore. He was walking like a soldier. He stopped in front of Earl. He studied the old man's face for a long moment, the eyes, the set of the jaw, doing the cruel subtraction that age forces on all of us. And then Command Sergeant Major Leon Pruitt, who had bossed generals and buried friends and feared almost nothing left on this earth, came to attention in the gravel of a county fairground and rendered a slow, perfect salute. "Sergeant Mercer," he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. "I'll be damned. I didn't think you were still with us." The crowd didn't understand. Tyler didn't understand. So Pruitt turned around and told them, loud enough to carry, because some debts are meant to be paid in public. He told them the man in the barn coat had been a senior instructor in the Army sniper program, that there were soldiers walking around alive on 3 continents who owed it to the fundamentals this man had drilled into them until they could shoot in their sleep. He told them that when Pruitt himself had been a scared 19-year-old who couldn't hold a sight picture to save his life, and he chose those words on purpose, it had been Earl Mercer who sat behind him in the dirt for a week and taught him how to breathe, how to be still, how to make himself small and patient and sure. "Everything I am," the command sergeant major said, "I am because this man refused to give up on me when I was nothing." He was looking at Tyler when he said it. But that was not the deepest thing, and Earl knew it before Pruitt finished, because Earl had been studying the loud kid's face the whole time. The jaw, the brow, something around the eyes that had been pulling at a thread in his memory since the boy first opened his mouth. "Son," Earl said quietly, cutting across the noise. "What's your last name?" Tyler blinked. "Cole," he said. "Tyler Cole." The old man closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet, and the whole fairground seemed to lean in. "Your granddad," Earl said. "Was his name Daniel?" "Danny Cole, out of Ohio. Skinny kid. Couldn't keep his mouth shut to save his soul." A breath. "Best spotter I ever had." Tyler had gone white. He had grown up hearing one story at every Thanksgiving. The story the family told the way other families tell about how Grandpa and Grandma met. The story of how Danny Cole had been hit in the Delta in '68 and would have died in the mud if his sniper hadn't thrown away the rules and carried him the better part of 3 miles through hostile country to a clearing where a helicopter could reach him. Danny Cole came home because of that man. He married, Henriette, and he raised 2 daughters, and one of those daughters had a son she named Tyler. The family had spent 50 years not knowing the name of the man who carried him. Danny had passed 2 winters back, and they had buried him still owing a debt they could never name. The man Tyler had mocked off the rope line, the old man he'd offered to humiliate for an easy laugh, was the reason Tyler Cole had ever drawn a single breath. The kid's face came apart. There is no other honest way to say it. 26 years old, all that gym muscle and all that swagger, and he stood on that firing line and wept like a child in front of everyone he'd been trying to impress, and then he crossed the gravel and put his arms around a stranger who was not a stranger at all. Earl Mercer held him the way he'd once held the boy's grandfather, and said the only thing there was to say, which was, "He talked about you, you know. Not you, exactly. He never got to know it'd be you. But he prayed about the family he was going to have. He'd be so proud of you, it'd embarrass you." The sponsor came forward and tried to put the $25,000 in Earl's hands. Earl wouldn't take it. He told them to put it toward the junior shooting program, the division his great-nephew shot in. So somebody teaches these kids the right way before the world teaches them the loud way. Then he handed Hollis back the rifle, both hands, the way you return something sacred, and he thanked him quietly, and he picked his tin of cleaning patches up off the vendor table, and he started back toward that old pickup the way he had come, unhurried, unassuming. A quiet old man in a coffee-coloured coat that the whole world had nearly let walk by. But before he reached the truck, he stopped, because Tyler had followed him out, the boy's eyes still red, and he asked the question every one of us would have asked. How? 78 years old, eyes that surely weren't what they used to be, no scope, no rest, no warm-up. How does a man do in 42 seconds what 31 others couldn't do at all? Earl looked at him for a moment, and then he looked back at the 3 steel plates shining far down the range, the same way he'd looked at them when he first walked up that morning, like a carpenter at a crooked door. "My eyes are bad," he admitted, and almost smiled. "Haven't been good for years. But you don't shoot with your eyes, son. You shoot with everything you've got left. And your eyes just confirm what the rest of you already knows." He laid a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Steady was never in the rifle. The young fellas keep hunting for it in the glass, in the gear, in the price tag. It isn't there. It's in the man. It always was." And then he climbed into his truck and drove home, and somewhere behind him on the firing line a young man who would never be quite the same picked up his $8,000 rifle, took off the scope, and started learning the one thing no amount of money can buy. If you believe the loudest man in the room is almost never the strongest, and that the quiet ones have earned every bit of the respect the world keeps forgetting to give them, then subscribe to this channel, because we tell the stories of the men and women everyone else walked past. And they deserve to be remembered out loud. Earl Mercer never once asked to be. That is exactly why he should be.